It seems that the Indiana Fever atmosphere isn't very nice.
I just thought our defensive rotations were bad. We were good in the first rotation, but the second rotation was just never there. And, when you give up that many points in the second half, it's going to be hard to win, so.
The Indiana Fever's last game was hard to watch. The team's defense completely fell apart, and despite Caitlin Clark's efforts, they simply couldn't recover. And that's why today we're going to analyze Clark's performance, the Fever's defensive problems, the refereeing, and what needs to change for the team to get back on track. So enjoy this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get going. In the Fever's last game, Caitlin Clark had a performance that generated mixed feelings. Offensively, she almost had a 20-point, 10-assist game, which is remarkable. Clark finished the game with 20 points, 3 rebounds, and 9 assists, hitting 3 of 8 three-point shots. However, his defense continues to be a serious problem. Clark has trouble keeping her opponents in front, and her defensive rotations are slow. In addition, turnovers were a problem. Clark committed 7 turnovers, 4 or 5 of which were actually her fault. Some were the result of teammates' mistakes, like when Sampson missed an easy layup. Even so, Clark needs to take better care of the ball to avoid these losses. While I understand that Clark is constantly being marked aggressively, which clearly demoralizes her, that's no excuse to give up playing defense. She needs to find ways to channel that frustration into competitiveness. Coach Christy Sides doesn't seem to be helping much either. The Fever's defensive strategy is clearly ineffective, and that's not just the fault of the players. In addition to the defensive difficulties, we had a tense situation in the last game when Clark got into a fight with Victoria Vivians. After hitting a three-pointer, Clark was bumped by Vivians as they returned to defense. This led to a heated exchange of words, and both ended up receiving technical fouls. This altercation showed that Clark is starting to fight back against the physical play she constantly faces. Despite everything, she needs to keep her cool and use this aggression to her advantage. Now let's talk about the Fever's defensive problems and how this is affecting the team's performance. Fever's defense was a complete disaster in the last game. The biggest problem is the lack of communication and defensive rotations. It seems that no one knows where they should be on the court, which results in opponents constantly finding free paths to the basket. And that's not all. We've seen Fever players unable to keep their opponents in front, and when they do, they don't know how to help or cover properly. The players look lost, and that points to a flawed defensive strategy. I have to question what Christy Sides is doing in training. The lack of adjustments is worrying. Even with Caitlin Clark struggling defensively, you can't put all the blame on her. It's clear that the whole team is failing in various aspects. Clark needs to improve defensively, but she also needs support and an effective game plan, which seems to be lacking at the moment. Let's be honest, Coach Sides needs to review her approach. It's her responsibility to sort out this defensive mess. If there isn't a drastic change, the Fever will continue to suffer in every game. Refereeing was another factor that complicated Fever's game. Caitlin Clark and her teammates were constantly the target of aggressive moves that weren't marked as fouls. Clark, in particular, was brought down several times without the referee taking any action. This is frustrating to watch and clearly affects the players' performance and morale. The lack of protection from the referees is worrying. Players like Clark are prone to injury when referees allow such physical play. There was one play where Clark was pushed in the air and fell dangerously, and nothing was called. If it continues like this, it's only a matter of time before a player suffers a serious injury. Coach Christy Sides has done well to defend her players, but she needs to find a balance. While it's important to protect her players, she also needs to ensure that the team keeps its head on straight and doesn't lose focus. The team has enough problems without being rattled by the refereeing. Clark, despite everything, continues to show resilience. She needs to keep pushing and find ways to overcome this adversity. But we can't ignore the fact that the refereeing needs to be fairer and more consistent. For Fever to improve, changes are essential. First of all, the defense must be adjusted. Christy Sides must focus on training defensive routines, communication, and coverage. The players need to better understand their positions and roles in defense to avoid the mistakes we've seen in recent games. Another recommendation is to review the rotation of players. Some players are clearly not performing well, and perhaps it's time to test new combinations. Players like Lexi Hull, who has struggled, could be replaced by those who are showing more consistency in training. The coach needs to be more dynamic in her choices and not be afraid to change what isn't working. It's also crucial to work on the team's confidence and morale. Caitlin Clark is clearly frustrated, and that's understandable. However, she needs more support from her teammates and a game plan that maximizes her abilities. Clark is an exceptional player and should be used in a way that takes advantage of her offensive ability while working to improve her defense. Finally, the Fever need to consider possible trades or signings. If the current team isn't working, bringing in new players who can contribute immediately could be the solution. The season still has time to recover, but changes need to start now. The Fever have 3 tough games coming up. First, they face Chicago Sky at home. This game is crucial as the Sky have had an average performance so far, with a record of 3 wins and 3 losses. It's an opportunity for the Fever to show some defensive improvement and perhaps secure a home win. Caitlin Clark will need to be at her best, both offensively and defensively, and the team as a whole must avoid the mistakes that have marred their previous games. Next up, the Fever travel to face the New York Liberty. This will be an even bigger challenge, as the Liberty are currently in 3rd place in the league, with a record of 5 wins and 2 losses. Playing one of the league's best teams away from home will be a stern test for the Fever. It will be essential for Christie sides to adjust the team's defense and for the players to be prepared to face a strong opponent. After these 2 matches, the Fever have a game against the Washington Mystics, who are bottom of the league with 0 wins and 7 losses. Despite the Mystics' poor performance, the Fever cannot underestimate their opponents. This game offers a crucial chance for the Fever to regain confidence and fine-tune any details needed to improve their overall performance. These 3 games could define the course of Fever's season. With the urgent need for victories, each player needs to commit to giving their best. Clark, despite her difficulties, remains a key player and needs all the support she can get from her teammates and the coaching staff. The team's performance in these games could determine whether there will be a turnaround in the season or whether the problems will persist. The hope is that with the right adjustments and a more cohesive performance, the Fever can start on a winning path. To conclude, it's clear that Fever have many challenges ahead of them. The defense needs to improve drastically, the refereeing needs to be fairer, and Coach Christie's sides needs to make significant adjustments to the strategy and rotation of the players. Caitlin Clark, despite the criticism and difficulties, remains an outstanding player and deserves support as she works to overcome her defensive weaknesses. The upcoming games against the Chicago Sky and the New York Liberty will be crucial in determining whether the Fever can turn their season around. These games offer the chance to fine-tune the defense, find the best rotation of players, and above all, show that the team can compete at a high level. Do you think Fever can turn the season around? I'll keep following closely and bringing you detailed analysis. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates, and leave your opinions on Fever's performance and what you expect from the next games in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you next time.